Hi, my name is Dion Bremer, and I'm in the creative writing program. Thank you so much for coming out tonight for our MFA prose reading. So tonight's readers are going to be Kiprop Kimutai. Did I say that right? Yes, okay. Nikhita Thomas and Maggie Wu. And I'd just like to draw your attention to some upcoming creative writing events here in the department. Atish Turser and Karen Muhajan are going to be in conversation with Azarine Vandervillet Illumi as part of the Literatures of Exile and Resistance. That's going to be on Thursday, October 30th in the Sojourner Truth Commons, which are across the way in O'Shaughnessy Hall on the 3rd floor from 5:30 to 7. Next, the Creative Writing Reading Series is going to host Kevin Jared Hossein, and that's going to be November 4th from 5 to 6:30, also across the way in the Sojourner Truth Commons. And the final event for the semester is going to be on November 5th, so the very next night. You can have night after night of readings with Valshina Mort, and that's going to be here in 235 DCO from 5 to 6:30 on the 5th. So tonight, the readers are going to introduce each other, so I get to just sit down and listen. Maggie will introduce Kiprop, and Kiprop will introduce Nikhita, and then Nikhita will introduce Maggie. So up first, please welcome Maggie Wu. Okay, oh, she's going to read first, and you're going to welcome Nikhita.
Okay, our first reader for today is my lovely friend and wise man, Kiprop Kimutai. Kiprop's a Kenyan writer and winner of the 2023 Graywolf African Fiction Prize for his manuscript, The Freedom of Birds, which is forthcoming from the Graywolf Press in 2026. His fiction has appeared or is forthcoming in No Tokens, the Johannesburg Review of Books, Kwani, Evergreen Review, Jalada Africa, Doek, and Lolwe. He's a 2023 Miles Morland Scholar and was a finalist for the 2018 Gerald Kraak Award. In 2024, he was a speaker at Yale University's second Genesis Epistemologies Conference and was a finalist in the storytelling category for the 2025 True Story Award in Bern, Switzerland, for his essay about his residency in Saint Paul De Vence, where James Baldwin lived in for the final years of his life. His name means he who brought the rain, but he has a rather sunny disposition, or so he thinks.
Hello. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming here at the beginning of fall break, no less. I appreciate it. So I'm going to read from my manuscript, The Freedom of Birds, and just a little context. The story is it's set in Kenya. It's about a gay man who runs away from his rural village because of a scandalous love affair, so he hides in the big capital city of Nairobi. But then Nairobi doesn't work for him, and he has to come back to the place he ran away from. I think one of the questions I'm trying to answer with the story is, how do you find belonging and connection when running away is no longer an option, among other questions? So I'll read a sample of chapter 1. The plain Matatu van took a sharp turn following the fading tarmac road, as if it was fleeing from the fields of maize, sunflower, and millet it had been quietly passing through, headed for the thick forest that stood to the east. Boulay was surprised by how absurd the road's design became, twisting and turning like a toddler's scribble. He took it to be an absurdity particular to Tolosio, a preposterousness with which he was also entangled. He still had no full sense how he, a gay man who had fled Nairobi 4 years ago, was coming back home. Squashed against the breath-dampened window, one of the 5 people on a row of seats meant for 3, he hunched over a brown duffel on his lap. Inside were 3 rubber-strapped bundles of about 100,000 shillings, a little less now, for he had used part of it as fare, and a paper on which his deceased father had drawn a handsome, silver-speckled Tolosio chicken. This was everything he owned. The matatu entered the forest and was subsumed by its shadow. Faces disappeared, and breaths, noticeably distinct in a suddenly silent world, turned loud and harsh. Boulay was relieved by the darkness, how it posited itself in the forest, as if material enough to hold up its canopy. He could no longer see the thin young man opposite him, who had on a camel-colored jacket and a disturbing, brittle look, typical to people from Tolosio, which could, at the slightest hint of provocation, transform into a frightening hatefulness. Boulay yearned for the darkness to persist, but the matatu thrust out of the forest once more, back to sunlight and fields, following the mad turns of the road. They stopped at Tolosio's town center, where Boulay trailed his hands over his hair and alighted. He was 2 inches taller now, and his chest filled his saffron pea jacket. He looked elegant. Everything about him did. The brown loafers that had accumulated dust, the pastel blue t-shirt under the jacket, the real leather belt. The only remnant from a past in which Tolosio had belittled him was the panic in his eyes. But from the flurry of people who walked up and down, some dragging sheep, some pulling goats, one with a bunch of crumpled manila envelopes in his hands, no person turned to look at him. There was a lot of dust, the ground troubled by many feet. The air was redolent with laughs, chicken clacks, screams, goat bleats. People were shaking hands, hugging, shoulder clasping, arm waving. Bicycles and motorbikes weaved between them with clammy engines. On the edge of the matatu stage were a row of weathered wooden kiosks. He desired to walk to one and reach for a cold soda from the ice box on its ledge. But Boulay walked on, his feet as close as possible, aiming to be invisible. His head was stiff and pointed in front of him. A casual turn could mean encountering the face of a person who would recognize him, and he couldn't afford that. He only felt his shoulders relax when he turned off the tarmac to a murram road behind Tolosio's only bank. It was hardly used because of how wet and dirty it often was, facing the back of a chain of shops which used it as an illegal dumping ground. Boulay didn't walk all the way to its end, but scaled a narrow footpath on its side that forced its way through thick shrubs and went up a knoll. The path eventually led him to a large shamba of maize, which was owned by many families, including his own. Each family knew their unmarked demarcation down to a single maize plant. Boulay walked through the maze wanting to be alone. He was preoccupied with the business of getting home and inside his childhood bedroom. He wanted to cover himself with his old blankets and block out the last 4 years. Only then could he start to make sense of his own thoughts. On a swath of Kikuyu grass that formed a terrace, splitting through the shamba of maize, sat a man. He had sinewy arms and soft-looking shoulders, and wore nothing but a blue shuka around his waist. His bare torso was dark, firm, and full of scars, as if his body had been torn in many places and banded back together. He had long locks with cowrie shells on their ends that splattered marvelously on his shoulders. And when he looked up, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Boulay had seen such a man in Nairobi, in the smoky corners of a dark basement where an underground party was held. A mesmeric queer man so comfortable in letting his body shake to an Afrobeat song, whose face had been lit with ecstasy. Boulay was sure it wasn't the same man, but he entertained the idea that it was. The same form of a man spat out before him by the universe. He wanted to run past the man. He wanted to keep looking. His brain urged him to speak, but the muscles on his tongue failed him. Son of Kosiom, the man said, mentioning his father's name, "You look so serious today." The man beckoned, and Boulay found himself moving nearer to him. The man smelled of coffee that had boiled too long. His earlobe was long and pierced. It made him look imperious. Boulay tried to place the feature on his face among the families he could remember from Tolosio, but his mind drew a blank, and his skin crawled as if the act of remembering those families was akin to pushing his face through a wall of fire. "How do you know me?" The man lifted his leg. Blood had dried and caked his left heel. Is that a question to ask a man who has stepped on a sharp piece of bone? "I don't think there's any hospital nearby," Boulay said, stepping onto the grass onto the terrace, closer to the man. It was as if he entered another world. Here the maize plants seemed taller and closer, like a rainforest. Their tasseled branches a canopy sealing out the dull parts of the sky. Their radiant pink silks brushing pollen into the air. Little birds skimmed about, tearing maize ears to suck on the soft kernels. Boulay felt the bits of him that was still outside himself flow in like a warm fluid inside an emptied container. The man kept looking at him. "I see you can see the beauty I'm seeing too, the kind of beauty that can make you forget your pain." Boulay smiled. He hushed the part of him that screamed about how fancily dressed he was, how all his money was in his duffel bag, and how the man seemed tough enough to pin him down with a finger even if he was bruised and take everything he owned. "I can't stay here for too long," he said. The man looked at him for a while, and Boulay felt as if he was pinned to the spot by his eyes. He pointed at the black striped yellow birds flying above them. "Look at how free their world is." "Stop saying things I don't understand," Boulay said. The man stood and placed his hand on Boulay's shoulder so that he could lean on the ball of his right foot. He introduced himself as Ahitophel and asked Boulay if he could remember him now. And Boulay said he couldn't, inasmuch as he had begun to sense a kind of familiarity in the man. "Can I look at the wound?" Boulay said. It had been a long time since he had looked at the foot of a man who walked without shoes, seen how the nails hardened and turned black, how the heel fissured and cracked. It was difficult to tell where the piece of bone had sunk because blood had congealed with the soil, leaves, and twigs Ahitophel had stepped on. Boulay felt compelled to take him home to wash and dab his wound with gentian violet. There had to be some in the wardrobe in his mother's bedroom, which was also stacked with her rosaries and the black and white framed pictures of her wedding. "It's getting late," Boulay said. "Let us hurry home." Ahitophel placed his arm across Boulay's shoulders. They hobbled past the shamba to a knoll with thick Kikuyu grass. A cow with tawny patches on its shapeless, overstretched udder bellowed as it observed them. Boulay stiffened. The cow was bound with rope and tied to a tree stump, and likely belonged to his uncle Stomba, who grew maize with his mother on a part of the shamba. To the east, overlooking the forest, was a vista of Kombasagong, a range of hills that rose, looped, and fell, becoming blue and frail when they touched the horizon. Ahitophel pointed in their direction. "My people are preparing afternoon tea on that side," he said. "If only I could walk properly, I would go and not come back." Boulay looked at the hills but did not hear him. He felt a pain in his heart instead, sudden, a ripping resulting from remembering the boy he had once loved, with whom he was in a circumcision camp on one of the smaller hills that composed Kombasagong. The boy had a round face and an easy, baby-like slump in his shoulders when he relaxed. His face had been saved from an obvious lethargy by a hint of a cunning smile. Boulay remembered reaching out for Wendot's hand on the long walks the elders instructed them to take when their circumcision wounds were fairly healed. How he had expected the boy to hurl his hand back, and how the boy had kept holding on. They walked together, twisting further inside the dark paths in the forest and singing mind-numbing initiation chants when the realer song was the pulse between their hands. Boulay's skin crawled, knowing the memory was now about to end with a vision of Wendot dead, hanging by his neck on a tree because of the shame he felt for daring to love Boulay back, the same love that had made Boulay run away from Tolosio 4 years ago. Now he looked down at the slope of the land at his home, the same house with a green roof and black walls which he had to flee from when Wendot's family came to look for him, angry that Boulay had caused Wendot's death after Wendot left a letter behind, confessing their love and how he could not live without it. Boulay wondered how his former home could become home again, how it was now the only possible place he could live in. He was glad that he was not going home alone. "You have a beautiful home," Haitopel said. It reminds me of a black forest cake covered with pistachio ice cream," said Boulay. "I don't know what that is. It now looks so small." "You haven't lived here for a while?" Ahitopel asked. Boulay nodded. "Why now?" Boulay felt the weight of the duffel bag on his back, heavier now than it was 4 years ago when he ran away with it, holding only the few things he could quickly gather. "It's a long story," he said. Later, he would tell Ahitopel it was his dreams that made him come back home. In one, a pride of lions pursued him and he had to fight them off with a giant feather. He climbed a tree and the lions camped below, waiting. When they fell asleep, he jumped down and bolted, but soon they were panting behind him. By the time he thrust through the barbed wire fence surrounding his family's farm, he could taste blood in his mouth. Safe inside the fence, he walked to the podo tree. There he watched his father's funeral play, women holding their faces as they looked at the vineyard coffin, saying, "Eutingo leye." Men planting cosmos, poppies, purple hearts, and baby sun roses on the grave's freshly churned soil. Boulay saw the asterisk-shaped clot rise up a vein in his father's leg and stop his heart. He wiggled his toes and fingers in the dream, afraid a similar clot would form inside him. In another dream, the sun disappeared from Nairobi and sewage tanks mysteriously burst in the dark. Shit mushroomed and spilled over the city. Every house, bed, pavement, man, woman, child was covered with feces. People wandered in the drab landscape, searching for non-existent respite. As he walked, Boulay saw visions of Tolosio, passion fruit tendrils appearing like angels at the corners of his eyes, his mother stepping out of the front door with a tray of sweet potatoes baked under hot ash. He saw his incorporeal form circling the jagged edges of Komba Sagong. The dreams plagued him after Eric stopped answering his calls. Eric was Boulay's 3rd or 7th boyfriend. It was hard to tell what a relationship was and what a relationship was not in Nairobi's gay community. Eric was a little taller than him and had a firm abdomen. Boulay's favorite habit on the nights they spent together in Eric's airy apartment in Lavington was to slowly pull down Eric's jeans until they revealed his white boxers. He would pull the boxers down, and when they rested on Eric's erection, stroke his sweaty pelvic hair. Later, he would lie on Eric's chest as they watched bootleg movies. blanketed, legs curled together as if they were twins in a womb. The last call Eric answered was brief and crude. "I will call you back, I'm at a barber shop." He tried calling 3 hours later, but Eric disconnected and texted that he was in a meeting. Any call he met thereafter was unanswered. The evening before, they had been at Java Coffee House at Junction. Boulay had borrowed Eric's black jacket. It was mildly cold, and with his grey turtleneck, he would have been fine, but their conversation seemed stiff, and by borrowing the jacket, Boulay had hoped to conjure a carefree intimacy between them. Eric, without the jacket, in an off-white, short-sleeved V-necked shirt, sulked even more. He kept looking at the balcony, at the passers-by on the street, as Boulay struggled with an anecdote from the call center where he worked about how he had jammed the photocopier. "I brought you something," Eric interrupted. He retrieved a package from the laptop bag hanging on his chair. The package was long and wrapped in manila. He asked Boulay to unwrap it. Inside was a case of Calvin Klein colognes, Obsession, Eternity, Euphoria, Into You. Boulay trailed his fingers over the bottles. As a child, his mother had told him not to show much emotion when presented with gifts, and he was determined not to. "You like it, don't you?" "Yes, I do." Boulay's mouth was dry. He wanted water, a small sip, but he held onto the case of colognes until he felt pins and needles on his hands. "You don't look happy," Eric said. "Tell me the truth. Expensive colognes are not your thing." "I just feel like we aren't talking enough anymore. We don't talk like we used to." Eric's eyes dulled. "You know, I'm busy studying for my graduate degree, like we all are." Boulay stared at the table, a large wooden continent between him and Eric. "I have been judged for being who I am," Eric continued. "At times, I just want to relax and listen to my own thoughts. You can't expect me to be a chatterbox from January to December." Boulay took out the Obsession bottle. "Thank you for this gift." He wanted to unscrew the cap and dab the back of his ear, but he was shaking so much. He was afraid Eric would take back the case of perfumes and walk away. Eric sat up and ate his chicken salad. When they walked out, Eric didn't drive him to the stage where he could have taken a double M bus to his house in Tasia Estate. Instead, he asked Boulay to give him his jacket, entered the Subaru he had parked at the entrance, and drove off. Boulay took a matatu to Nairobi CBD and was glad to find a bus at the Double M stage next to the Ambassador Hotel. He sat next to the window, Eric's gift on his lap. He stared outside the whole ride home, never caring to check who was next to him. He felt strangely relieved when the pack of perfume was stolen. Boulay lived in a bedsit on the 3rd floor of an incomplete building that stood on muddy ground. He had squeezed in a mahogany table with 4 straight-back chairs, a Samsung fridge, a bookcase made from inferior wood, and bed frames he'd never set up. His clothes were heaped on his mattress, mingled with his blankets. He had loved to cook when he first moved in, but his untidiness grew to the point where it became a task to even find one of his 3 sufuriers. So for food, he would go down the stairs, hop over the mud puddles that collected outside his building, and follow a narrow footpath to a restaurant with a thatched roof and open walls. The restaurant had its patrons who would throng the place on the weekend to drink, watch football matches, and eat the softest boiled chicken in Tasia. His spot was always his. This was at the table next to the partition separating the sitting area from the kitchen. No one else could bear the smoke the kitchen belched. Boulay loved the spot because it meant sitting alone. He could bribe the cook with 20 shillings for an extra drumstick without the cashier noticing. When Eric stopped answering his calls, Boulay stopped going to the restaurant. He bought 6 packets of sausage soya chunks, 3 packets of Santa Lucia spaghetti, and 6 onions. He rummaged through the untidy room and found a sufuria squeezed inside a pair of jeans he had abandoned after he gained weight. The meko was still full of gas, and he wiped off the cobwebs and plucked a fat slug wedged on its grills. He had to buy a box of matches, and that bothered him. All that walking out to find a shop when his heartache demanded isolation. But it turned out fine, for he came back with 3 tomatoes along with a box of matches. He blended the tomatoes and poured them on the frying onions and soya chunks, letting it cook till it formed a thick brown soup. The result was a gluey paste streaked with reddish slime that was difficult to scoop. It became his only food for 3 days. His stool turned loose and faint-colored. At hospital, he was diagnosed with an amoebic infection and got a week sick off from the call center. It helped that he trained, sometimes so heavy that he couldn't hear his thoughts. He would wake up in the middle of the night and sort the heaps of clothes, the corduroys, the khakis, the chinos, the black bootcut jeans. He arranged them according to color and size on the mahogany table. He kept retrieving items from around the room, finding a white vest still wrapped in its plastic casing, loafers that would be as good as new with the right suede, leather belts with shiny buckles. With time, the collection of good attire on top of the table seemed a separate world from the rest of the CD room. When he was done sorting, Boulay looked at them with pride. Other times, he would switch off the lights and lie on the mattress, indifferent to the biting mosquitoes. He would try and remember the conversations with Eric. What would come to mind instead were KCB's Sundowner songs he'd grown listening to in Tolosio. The songs jumbled in his memory. Mary McKee's Show Me Heaven meshed with Bonnie Tyler's Total Eclipse of the Heart. Crystal Gale's Sound of Goodbye blended with Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time. New melodies that matched the agony in his heart. Later, he would tell Ahithophel he had willed his own firing. After the sick leave for 2 months or so, he logged in late for work and took so many personal breaks to go cry in the washroom, ending with the lowest call rate and adherence scores in his team. He was slammed with the pain of losing the life he could have had with Eric, by the disgust he felt that he had believed he could have had a life with Eric. The only solace from these thoughts came from looking at the clothes, belts, coats, and shoes now polished and arranged on the table. I'll stop there. So I'm going to introduce Maggie, who next, who's become a dear friend, and I love the books you recommend to me. So Maggie Wu is a writer from Portland, Oregon. Her fiction and essays have been published in Diagram, Glass Mountain magazine, and is forthcoming in 3 AM magazine on October 27th. Before her MFA, she received a Fulbright grant to Taiwan and worked in public policy. She graduated from Amherst College in 2022 and misses Western Massachusetts very much. Currently, she's inspired by her dog Frezzo, melodrama by Audre Lorde, Nikolai Gogol, and HBO's Girls. I couldn't ad-lib, but
I want to open with a short improvisation before moving into a longer piece. So the first thing I wrote came to me last Friday when I attended an organ recital by students in the sacred music department. I was writing this as they were playing a hymn called Soul, Adorn Thyself with Gladness, which is the title of this poem. Crass Christopher Robin, now a coxswain cochino, never coming back to your childhood woods. Dazed against a black light, television screens alit, no end in sight. Sit with me, why don't you? Be convivial and good. For my paws are gray and suited with puss, tattered boots, and pyre. I'll be your happy-go-lucky honey bear for the weekend. We can soup, slop, slip, swig, catch, hop, hip, spit, swagger, watch Tigger the tiger, pogo stick, skip, trip, clap down, dells, dwindling, dodo, dead. I am writing this in church. You cross me, I cross you. I am the porter of sweetness, the keeper of wax. Pledge to me, and you may very well pass. Say, be a deer, and go up to the mountain. Ring the bells, and fetch the water from the well. Now is the time for spells and sophistry and misty-eyed confessions in starlight. Run through the hills and shout it from the rafters, my friend. Awaken, my beloved. As if. My beloved sleeps underground with the silent earth as their shroud, and marmots for companions. But do not pity me, for all the world's a peach, and I am the pit. The days are stout with sweet spit and indolence, wishes falling to the well. Hark! I write thee a happy hymn. Jubilation, just joust jolt ahead, and remember the red juice in your veins to sap away by flies. Great wine upon my cherry, why don't we sit on the porch and watch the fawns passing through the mist, gossip, sip as the crickets tick, tap, 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 sap and syncopate with the decay of the day. Honeyed harvests that will not last, for we are bound by our fussy finitudes, and the hour that gilds us will bite like the sugar bee stings. Northern lights, winter coat, snow on my belly, not so fast. We soar and slump into our pews. Why does no one clap for us when we sing our pretty hymns? I am old now, yet my buttered bass is fresh as February frost. What hour is this, I do not know. I am of two minds that never meet on the mountainside. Doubtful lord of winding corridors, swaying this way and that, I bend with the tall grasses when all roads lead to ash. Do you believe me? Do I tempt you? I am tired and my midst been sour. No mountain, just a specter shade in the clouds, the dust has come to stay. Still, I must insist on this lullaby. Say, Christopher Robin, which way will you go today? What will you choose? Forget not that I was once a pretty bear, long black nails tapping a dirge on the beak of my feathered Kessie, kestrel-toothed friend, fletched with metallic music, fleet-furred like the gray-bearded beargrass near the Crystal Mountain Creek. Chrissy, come home, be convivial and glad again, step away from the bleak, mean mezzanine and throats throttled with cigars. Adorn your lady piglet with agates and amethyst, and lift the stones from her heart. I want to sit in your shade and wash your feet in nectar. We'll make you glad again, Chrissy, come home. You'll be my amber mellow summertime, and I'll be your portly poo. My friend, Chrissy, come home. Drape your lips with syrup and browse these 100 acres of moss and myrtle. You say each path you take goes to the grave. What if then you stay, dance with the bullfrogs on this beat? Chrissy, come on, why don't you stay until the flesh falls from your whittled bones, until only the sticky parts are left? Okay, now it's time to get serious. This is Nobody Cries Before Breakfast. Before daybreak, the house at the end of the street stammered to life. The old man rose first and woke the dog Azucena, who was still too drowsy to ask for anything, then reached into the icy chambers of the refrigerator for a bag of tea eggs. Slowly, gingerly, the way he had seen his wife do it years before, he rolled each egg onto a white napkin to soak off the excess marinade and plopped two into an old ice cream cup, going to great lengths to fit them both without rupture. After a while, the young girl headed into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes and slouching under the weight of a heavy backpack. She grunted at the old man, who muttered a few syllables in return. The two of them rolled the suitcases and the dog into the car and shuffled out of their dove-blue nest. By habit, the young girl sat in the back seat with the dog. The old man put the cup in the vacant seat next to him. In the rearview mirror, the young girl could see the old man's excessively large ears. His untrimmed eyebrows hooded his eyes, which were hidden behind a pair of heavy spectacles. She suspected that he was losing his eyesight, though he did not tell her, and she did not want to acknowledge it, for she was a photographer by profession and feared that it was an inheritable trait. Seeing the old man in the rearview mirror, she again felt her hands fidget for her camera, as he had done many times before on the trip. Yet she fought the magnetic pull of the machine by sinking her hands into Azucena's fur and squishing the dog's plump neck. Outside, the road was dark and gray. The tips of pines leaned upon the horizon, the legs of plastic dolls. She had thought that she would photograph the old man. She truly had, so much so that she had decided to stay 3 weeks instead of her usual 2, thinking she could coax him in front of her lens. To her, portraiture was like sculpture, a craft of molding the subject into a coherent masterpiece. But when she had walked into the foyer of the bare and chilly house and seen the old man in his loose pajama pantaloons, she knew she couldn't do it, couldn't capture the extremities that she did not understand, nor temper him into the dual-dimensional. She could just imagine it, his photograph hanging in some gallery on West 14th Street's Artists of Color exhibit, with a herd of wool-clad spectators looming over him. "Oh," one of the sheep would say, "look at this peculiar breed of Oriental. I have never seen one with such elephantine ears." "Yes," another would say, "I see such deep and forlorn suffering in his soulful eyes. The artist captures the repressed vulnerability derived from ceaseless war, famine, colonialism, communism, imperialism, and dogmatic Confucian values, suffering so intimate that only the artist must know of her father, yet suffering we all feel because we all have fathers. Then he would be bought and sold for a hefty sum that she would exchange for drugs or drinks or both, and the sheep would hang the photograph in their dining room so their dinner guests would finally feel something, perhaps marvel at the man's melanotic skin, which indubitably came from years of fishing in an idyllic but now industrialized fishing village, and they would be completely correct but utterly wrong. She remembered that she had buried 2 canisters of film in the pocket of her traveling coat, still unopened since the beginning of the trip. She began to play with the film canister, and the percussive plop of the container opening and closing gave her great satisfaction, like raindrops falling into an empty cavern. At each plop, Azucena, who had been singing softly to the hum of the sedan, flicked her ears in a sudden ticking motion, and the young girl found this very funny. The old man sighed, the torture of familiarity. When you love someone unconditionally, you'll do anything to them and still call it love. The entire car ride had been buzzing pianissimo until then. Soon they found themselves on a cliffside by the sea, for the airport was at the edge of a narrow peninsula. "Look, we are now on a cliffside by the sea," said the old man in his enunciated, perfect English, which he had styled after the old Hollywood actors he had watched as a young boy. The young girl was not used to talking to the old man in her sonorous woman voice, so she shifted into a vaporous, high-pitched nasal reserved for impersonations of the dog. She remarked, "Azucena says, I hate the sea. It's very much too gray and icy. I imagine that this is what hell looks like." The old man remembered this ancient game. His wife was the first one to give Azucena a voice. 15 years later, his wife was somewhere else, and the dog was the only steady and sardonic constant between then and now. So the old man gave into the game as he always did. "No," says Azucena, he said. "I like this place very much. How could I not? This is my home. I want to sink my little paws in the sand." For the rest of the car ride, the old man and the young girl talked sparingly through the dog. When they arrived at the airport, the young girl needed to check her bags. "New Zealand, correct?" said the woman at the counter. "Yes," said the young girl. "I am photographing the bushfire there." "May I see your passport?" She handed the woman her documents. The woman looked at her with an inquisitive expression and glanced down at her passport photo, then up at the young girl again. "I'm sorry, but is this you? The person in the passport has significantly larger ears than you." In the corner of her eye, she saw the old man look away. Yes, I have changed my ears for a less obtrusive set. Here is verification from my surgeon. The woman nodded as if to approve of the young girl's choice, and the old man and the young girl proceeded to the gate. The old man went to the coffee shop. As he perused the menu in line, he noticed the name of a tea leaf native to his hometown. How fickle the taste of this funny land, and how funny that he should travel all this way to be back where he started. He was still staring at the menu when the cashier pointed to the photograph in his wallet. "Is this your daughter?" she asked. "I believe so," said the old man. He looked at the photograph. To be sure, the young girl was beaming at him from his wallet slip. Long ago, he might have thought that they belonged to each other, but lately, nothing held them together but a few hackneyed memories. Perhaps it was natural. She, of course, was of the belief that she deserved everything she wanted, yet she often forgot that he wanted also. The cashier looked perplexed by his response. The old man laughed as he walked away. Meanwhile, the young girl stayed with Azucena, yawning as she held the dog. It was still very early. She always left in the mornings when drowsiness numbed all sensitivities. Only then did she need to sleep so badly that any sadness or restless agitation was pushed underwater and suffocated in the trenches of her consciousness. The dog Azucena, however, knew the familiar shades of the terminal, the steady shuffling of travelers filing through the gates, the distant roars of aircraft or waves. Parting made Azucena begin to whimper, her pitiful screeches rising above the murmurs of travelers. The young girl was unfeeling towards this barbaric spectacle. She wished that the old man would come back to calm the dog. Finally, he returned with 2 coffee cups. "Here," he said to the young girl, "this one is for you." "But I need to board soon and I can't take that through security," she said. "I know," said the old man, "but we still have some time." "I don't drink coffee. It makes me jittery," she said. She looked away, not intending to sound so blunt. Being around him made her unapologetically cruel. She did not know what to say to him anymore. As a child, she was always ready with a retort, though she could not remember why they fought, only that they did, and she was still angry with him. Perhaps because he had given her his face, his ears, or perhaps because he had brought her to this colorless world without acknowledging how hard it was for her, how hard it still was. She did not know, only that she detested this place, the misty heather light, the perpetual wailing of the sky. But she could not tell the old man of his distaste, of her distaste for living, because it would only hurt him. Still, she hurt him nonetheless. No, she could not photograph the old man, whom she did not know. "Okay," said the old man, upon hearing Azucena wails, added, "Azucena is very sad." The young girl looked at the dog's arched forehead and dark celestial eyes and felt a contraction in her chest. When she was younger, she could never maintain eye contact with her interlocutors, and Azucena's infinite pools were the sole pairs of eyes she had seen. Even now, as she faced the old man, it was strange for her, as she seldom saw him from the front. She could not look at his eyes and instead focused her gaze on his enormous ears. Again, she felt her hands reach for her camera. The old man looked at his small-eared daughter and knew that the dreaded moment had arrived. He reached out and hugged her, carefully swerving his large ears out of the way. The young girl gave Azucena to the old man, and the old man gave her the container of tea eggs. The girl smiled and turned around. Smoke curled from the discarded coffee in the trash, still hot. The dog screamed, wailing, "Oh, I am being abandoned again. Oh, I will never be happy again. I am dying." And no one understood her, though she was right, as saying goodbye was a kind of death. As the young girl boarded the plane, she thought about the night in her 22nd year when she had looked in the mirror at her excessively large ears and how they had orbited her head like 2 porous asteroids. They were heavy and she was exhausted and worn, and soon she wielded the coolness of a knife into the side of her head, carving into the soft tissue of her ears, which was so much easier than she had thought, just as easy as slicing into a summer peach, the juice trickling down the edges of her ragged head, squirting all over the sink and the bathroom floor. as she had called for her father, and he had called the surgeon, and the surgeon had fixed her up. "You don't look like me anymore," remarked the old man when she had gotten her new set. Or rather, as Susanna had said, he had slumped his shoulders in resignation. He didn't know her at all, but all she felt was relief. The flight took off, and she realized that the old man was the only person in the world who would clean up her mess, but she would always blame him for causing it in the first place. After seeing the young girl through security, the old man and Azucena piled into the car. He had no regrets and nothing to anticipate. The day stretched before him, long and listless, the trunk of a fossilized pachyderm. Overhead, the sauntering sky had only just begun to brighten to an everlasting glacial gray. Perhaps he would call up an old friend from school, which he had been meaning to do for the past few months, or his brother who was unattainably far away. But more likely, he would be in his old and frayed bed with the dog on his lap, starting and ending television shows about dynastic families. He would then take his daily walk and proceed to water his wife's old plants. For dinner, he would get takeout from the Japanese restaurant on the street corner and make Azucena roasted pork. This was what he did every day before the young girl arrived, and what he would do every day until she returned. Beside him, Azucena curled into a little ball. When she was young, someone told her that eternal punishment was an inferno as hot as the surface of the sun. She thought this was strange, as she always found fire to be brilliant and beautiful. No, more likely it was colorless, the fading dyes of sheets as the fibers thinned and snapped to oblivion, the cold monotony of routine, which spun as faithfully as a new washer or a week-long laundry cycle. The silence of the house amplified by the clamor of a neighbor's garden party. The sort of primordial sadness that flourished without reason. Sometimes she wondered why she cried, but then remembered the gray varnish that permeated her memories. She spent more hours asleep than awake. Now she was tired again, and her service as a conduit was over. Next to her, the old man swiftly rubbed his eyes like a fish leaping upstream. Only the dog saw. Nikhita Thomas grew up mostly in Bangalore, India. She reads, she draws, sometimes she writes in English. Loves a long list of ladies, especially friendly wits. She appreciates, in no particular order, pretty hands, people who live to eat, pictures of frogs, good mustaches, and all kinds of foolishness. Please welcome my new and already dear friend, Nikhita.
So this is in many ways the first short story I wrote and first proper short story I wrote, and I would write it very differently today, but I have decided to read it as is for today's reading. It's titled Gas. On Sunday mornings, Da liked to ring up other married men and interrogate them. Endado palli poyo? What man went for church? In response to whatever they said, he would, like a lizard, and announced, "Sheh! Just now we returned. Ane, you did not see me at mass or what?" Then he chuckled gleefully because this was a lie. We never went for mass, let alone on Sundays. We were not even members of any parish. When he caught me looking, Tao winked at me to let him be. Witnessing his performance, my mother looked up to the heavens and quietly asked for mercy. This was her performance. It may just be that my parents get some kick out of pretending to be good Christians. That Sunday morning, Dad did not call anyone. Instead, he held the swell of his growing belly and announced, "Gas. I have gas." To remedy this, he inhaled 4 Robusta bananas and marched over to the cuckoos with a Sunday supplement to kill time, to berate it to death. "Is it twins?" my brother ventured from outside the bathroom. Some grunts, some heaves, a slipper flew out to answer the boy. He slunk away. By noon, and to no avail, several trips had been made to the bathroom. Alert to the worry ripening our faces, Da insisted now and then, "Only gas, full stop." Then he rolled out the frayed grey yoga mat and assaulted the thing with 20 jumping jacks and a Surya Namaskara. Took a jolt out a fart. Nothing. "Please," my mother said. "Namak hospital poga. Let us go to the hospital." "Your father will come pay for it or what?" he retorted from the mat. Face down and pivoted on his bloat, he looked like a seesaw. In a while, we did go to the hospital. My father, for the most part, listened to my mother, even though he sometimes barked at her things he felt a husband ought to bark at his wife. My brother, who in those days only emerged from his room and was called for. And we, meaning me, my mother, and my brother, drove to the nearest hospital with Da. Adult terror. When, led by a strain of curiosity only found in childhood, I unearthed the meaning of adulterer, I was certain my father was one. "Thou shalt not commit adultery," Sister Judith recited in catechism class. And we, her 10-year-old subjects, chanted back impassionately, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." "But sister, what does it mean?" I asked her. She pinched my bum and sent me away. From here on, I wobbled after her, all 10 commandments a little less pious. Back home, teetering from the revelation that the adults around me had no interest in supplying me with all the answers, I rifled through a pocket dictionary my father had gifted me. Adultery. Sex between a married person and somebody who was not their husband or wife. Below that, adulterer. A person who commits adultery, especially a man who commits adultery. I decided my father was one. Not because of anything he did, but simply because I believed this was what eventually happened to all families. Adult terror. Or maybe because of something he did. Once at a dinner party, a drunk tar who sat across the table from me shared a cup of pista ice cream with a young woman from his office. Her lips were painted an urgent shade of red, one my father would never let my mother wear. They spoke to each other in English, a dainty silver spoon passing back and forth between them. Pista, yuck. I looked at my mother, who sat beside me timid with her little English, and felt a great deal of revulsion on her behalf. It was not so much the whiff of infidelity that bothered me as it was his recklessness. In front of my mother, this, as I recall, is the first time I wanted to kick my father. The blips on the ECG looked like a doctor's scribble, which is to say that it told us nothing. "Just gas, don't worry, okay," the young nurse assured us. Unlike the ECG, she spoke our language, so we believed her. We believed her also because her hair was neatly pinned up into an obedient-looking bun. So we too obediently headed back home. My mother, now limp and scared, looked around for things to clean. My brother disappeared behind closed doors. Da, smug as though he wasn't the pumpkin in the room, shimmied out of his pants into a faded cotton lungi. Topless, he curled up on the sofa like a very hairy Malayali mermaid. "What did I say?" he said. "Chumma waste of money." From the kitchen, where she was wiping down the microwave, my mother asked him to shut up. Evening arrived. Da, still married to the sofa, looked practically bovine. My mother, laced up, joined the flock of apartment aunties who jogged half-heartedly. My brother, in the habitat of his room, could be heard mumbling sweet nothings over the phone to a girl he thought we knew nothing about. The sky was the color of a ripe papaya. Only Da and I remained in the living room, alone together. Everywhere else, I was quick to color in silence with all shades of chatter. In my father's company, I tolerated, even appreciated the quiet. When we did talk, it was brief and frivolous in the way two strangers might fraternize. Our exchanges were rarely without grace from my mother, and I cannot now recall many instances when we were alone together. Da used to pick me up from the railway station during semester breaks in college. The car ride home was a silent affair. I sat buckled upright and staring straight ahead, made queasy by the smell of upholstery mingling with the AC. Da sat adamant about not letting me roll down the windows. Neither of us felt compelled to say anything in our cold bubble, nor did it bother us. During these rides, despite the vomit threatening to exit me, I liked my father. Da and I settled into a lull that only startled when my father rolled off the sofa and belched a laborious belch. Alarmed, I called my mother, asking her to leave her flock, and knocked on my brother's door, interrupting his courtship. We three crowded around the man of the house, now a sizable watermelon. Our animated concern must have embarrassed Da, who yelled at me in bullet points. "You have no sense or what? Did I ask you to call them? Idiot!" This last one sprayed me in the face. Idiot was my father's go-to word to fling at us when enraged. A handy 3-syllable to cripple a 10-year-old. At 24, the word only reminded me that I had grown older, my father old. Something about it made me sad. That was all he could muster. Idiot. English, I had learned from my father, was a cheap trick you could use to shut people down. It was wrong then to wield this lesson to win battles against him, but when scratched, I did it regardless. Da did not like being the center of attention. He liked even less being the center of attention for having gas, which he continued to insist was all it was. My mother begged him into the car. My brother drove once more to the hospital. When I tried piling in, my irritated father said, "Is this a funeral or something? Why all of us are going?" So I remained home, even though I could not remember a single instance when we went to a funeral, all 4 of us as a family. For a while I read, opened the fridge and closed it, boiled a kettle of water I wouldn't remember to drink, and forgot about my father. Divorce. When I was a little girl, I would frequently ask my mother to divorce my father. A boy at school with divorced parents invited me to both his birthday parties, one which his mother threw for him and the other courtesy of his father. This, I thought, was splendid and conveyed so to my mother while I followed her around the kitchen. On good days, she just laughed and jabbed me jovially with a powdery rolling pin, almost like she fancied the idea. Maybe it made her feel like I was on her side, even though there were no sides to pick in our household. On other days, on days Da and her fought, my prattle about divorce annoyed her. On these days when she loathed him, my mother reminded me what a good father he was to us, almost as if she were reminding herself. An hour passed. I remembered my father, the same one who had been carted off to some hospital. My mother, when I called her, blubbered. I thought I heard heart attack in between sobs, but how do you ask a weeping woman to repeat herself? So I called my brother, who just said, "Did you forget?" He did not wait for an answer. "Heart attack," he said. "You should come. Pack him a bag." I noted down the name of the hospital. In my father's underwear drawer, foreign territory, I found socks, bunions, and comically vibrant ties I'd never seen him wear. My strange mother ironed even his underwear, which lay neatly folded in bundles. Waffling through them, I pulled out the pairs without holes and stuffed them in a bag. On the rickshaw ride to the hospital, I tried to brood over the kind of lousy daughter I was, but wisps of hair kept getting stuck to my lips, interfering with remorse. The city whisked past in a stone blue blur. Meanwhile, at the hospital, a doctor, who looked like he was playing doctor, had pulled my mother aside to inform her that it was a heart attack. Da sat waiting in the corridor, unaware of the heart that was quitting on him. My mother is a dutiful wife. This means that she is incapable sometimes of maintaining even a modicum of discretion. In her usual dutiful way, she approached my clueless father and told him about the heart attack. And he, upon learning this, swooned and dropped with a thud, just as he did 20 years ago when he saw my mother after a C-section. From here, he was collected into a gurney and wheeled away into oblivion. The doors clapped shut. My mother and brother waited for my father, for me to remember that I had one. I found them in a waiting room. All around us, friends and families of other unfortunates slumped against each other. A lumpy woman was sleeping stretched across 3 chairs. The thin shawl struggled to cover all of her. Her toenails painted a hot pink, some chipped, stuck out. I joined my mother and brother on the cold metal seats, racking my brain for prayers from catechism class long gone. I tried to pray. Our Father, Hail Mary, Holy Mary, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Nurses whisked past us. They saw our hopeful faces but pretended not to. My mother looked vacant and delicate like a thing prone to breaking. My brother sat a few chairs away from us. Occasionally, he got up to stroll the floor. Do you want vada pav? He asked me. The canteen is good. I wondered how the hospital and its canteen became familiar to him so quickly. Family arrived. Uncles, aunties, the stray cousin. I did not know who called them and when. Nobody smiled. I wished they would. They looked at us morosely as though Da had already died. I did not see my father pulling that stunt on us. Dying, I mean. He was not the melodramatic sort. From behind tinted doors, the doctor walked out. Addressing the gathering, he said, "It was a minor heart attack. We've placed a stent in his heart. All good." "Tent or?" my mother asked. I imagined a miniature tent pitched within the canals of my father's heart. Tiny workers emerged from it. They adjusted their eyes to the gushing red all around them and geared up to fix his heart. "No, stent," the doctor replied, and moved on to the next hapless family. On the internet, I looked up stent. It looked like it sounded, a compact thing designed to be inserted into some ridiculously small space. Too flimsy for my substantial father. Had nothing to do with tents, however, and was named after a fellow named Charles D. Stent, just like sandwiches and Bunsen burners and Horlicks. The first person Da asked for from the ICU was my mother. Whatever transpired between them, I had no interest. But I did wonder if being confined to a hospital bed gave husbands better capacity for kindness towards their wives. Next, he called my brother. This pricked me, but I wasn't about to quarrel with a man who had just had a heart attack. "What did you say?" I asked my brother when he returned. "Money matters," he replied, but remained tight-lipped when prodded. Finally, third in line, I was sent to meet my father. The aisle leading up to the ICU stretched long and immaculate. I wanted to run up its length like a plastic bag in the wind. Instead, I walked slow and somber and readied myself to receive any profound words my father might have to offer. When I reached him, Da appeared to be sleeping. He looked withered like a bad toothpick. In the American TV shows I watched, patients were always trying to escape in flimsy floral hospital gowns with their naked bums on display. Did Da have an exposed bottom under his hospital attire? I did not dare ask, even with the man being too weak to move. Before I could wake him, his eyes fluttered open. Mentally, I sharpened a pencil to note down important numbers, passwords, family secrets. Da studied me with some interest. "How are you feeling, Da?" I asked. "Can't you see?" He managed to shoot back, his speech like the wobbly leg of a chair. He fished out something from beneath his pillow and presented it to me. An underwear. Black underwear, free of holes. On its grey waistband and bold red letters, jockey. "Shaddiyo?" I asked him, looking at the underwear entrusted to me. "It's my favorite. Keep it safe," he replied. He sounded triumphant. All the undies in our family came from the same place, the mountains of discounted undergarments, factory rejects, defective pieces that my mother picked from at Commercial Street, year after year. I gathered that Da, holding on to his precious briefs, did not know this. I surveyed my father's face to see if some part of it had gone slack. Awake, he looked thirsty. Suddenly, I wanted to weep. I tried stuffing his underwear into my pocket, but it bulged like a tumor. So I folded it neatly, squarely, into a shape I hoped did not give away what it was. "I got underwear from home," I told him. My father smiled at me. Okay. So the second piece I want to share with you, I don't want to read anymore. So I wrote and drew a zine about drinking tea a while ago. So I've printed out copies of the zine and folded it for you guys. And I'd really love it if you took a zine or two home with you. And I'm going to hand out the zines now.